Hello and welcome. Today we're going to be talking about early childhood cognitive development. Now, for this chapter, what we're really going to be focusing on when we're talking about cognitive development is our thinking processes. And so, in order to understand our thinking processes, we have to have a basic understanding of neuroscience, the structure of a brain, how the brain communicates using neurons, all the parts of the brain that are involved with diverse forms of thinking and fine and gross motor skills. Again, our brain's ability to make our body do what we want it to. When we read versus when we do math, different parts of our brain light up, but often those parts overlap. So again, you have this interconnected neural pathway system, just like the map when you pull up Google Maps with all the streets, and the neurons or the cars drive on those roads, and that's how basically how we think. But what we want to focus on now is pretty much the evolution of our thinking. So again, we all are born with that biological capacity for language, for neural processing, the ability to do math and think abstractly. So again, that's the biological side. But here we're going to start really focusing on the cognitive and the psychosocial side, in that as we interact with the environment, as we have experiences, as our brain is stimulated and we perceive what's going on in the world, that is how our brain really develops. So again, who you are as a person, the developing person, is that blend with your biological capacities, what you're born with, the basic biological functioning of your brain and body, but then also, your cognitive functions like emotions, motivation, general thinking, and then your social experiences, the social context. Who are your parents? How are they raising you? Do you have brothers or sisters? What kind of culture are you exposed to? What socioeconomic status are you exposed to? Because again, when you look at culture, the groups that you belong to structure the groups that you're socialized into. So if you belong to a lower class culture, you get socialized into a lower class cultural way of life, versus if you're born rich, you get socialized into a more rich way of life. Depending upon the school you go to, were you socialized to write super formally before you ever got to college, or did your school, was it not up to par, for example? Again, who are the agents of socialization that are going to teach us stuff, that interact with us, that give us our skills? Again, so you're going to be talking about your parents, the family system, you're going to be talking about your peers, media. How are you exposed to through the media, education system? How does the education system structure your way you think, your general culture that you're exposed to, your values, ideologies, beliefs that you've been taught? How does that structure how you think? And so again, as somebody develops, in order to understand their personality, again, temperament is that basic biological you, but that personality and then the way their brains and bodies are evolving, we have to understand the genetic person. Then we have to understand their emotions, their motivations, the way they're thinking. And then we also have to understand all of their experiences in the social context, because these are the things that shape us. Okay. So again, in this class, and specifically this chapter, we need to be thinking about all the various things that shape us, that teach us the skills, that set us up to be productive citizens, okay? How does society mold us? How do you yourself mold yourself, trying to be the person that you want to become? And that sounds kind of funny. How do you yourself mold yourself to become the person you want to become? But think about it. Ask yourself, who do you want to be? Are you not trying to become that person? Do you kind of shape and mold your thoughts and your behaviors to be that person that you're trying to be? Okay. So what we're really looking at in this class is our executive functioning. And overall, your executive functioning takes the development of your prefrontal cortex. And as I've said many times in this class, that doesn't totally fully develop until you're about 25. But when a kid hits 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, that's kind of the age that we're talking about with this chapter. Watch how much their brain just starts to take in information and be able to figure stuff out and then make their body do what they want it to do. Not only are kindergartners and first and second graders doing math, but they're also playing sports and just doing incredible things that they couldn't do a couple years before then. So what has changed? And ideally, or overall, what has changed is this executive function. Our ability to control our thoughts and our ability to control our bodies evolves over time as we interact in the social context, as we have practice socializing, learning emotional regulation, developing our social skills, developing our language skills, developing our gross and fine motor movements so we can make our body do what we want. Okay, so executive functioning is this cluster of abilities, your ability to do math, science, reading, roller skating, art, talking, telling a funny story, whatever it is, okay? Your ability to do these things growing over time, that's your executive functioning capacity, your ability for yourself to control your brain and body and make it do what you want, essentially. That grows over time, okay? So again, it starts to really grow rapidly during this early childhood years, after two, basically, after your toddler years. By about four, this is when it really kicks in. So this chapter, we're really talking about kind of 4 to about 9, that early childhood, right when they're getting past the toddler age, when they finally learn the mastery of their bodies. They start to learn the mastery of their language by about age 5, you know. So that's kind of where we're at. So again, executive functioning is not just your thinking skills, your ability to do math, though. We also have to focus on our emotional reasoning, our emotional skills, our emotional intelligence, and also our social skills, our ability to use language to interact in the social environment. Okay? So there are several processes that the book will focus on, and one is our ability to encode and retrieve memories. I like to say your personality is nothing but memories stored, and then your identity is really just shaped by a bunch of memories, which are really just a bunch of neurons releasing neurotransmitters. If you guys are interested in memory, watch my lecture on memory, and I go so deep into how cool memory is and how schemas of knowledge are really just a bunch of memories, and then our ability to like organize those memories into a cohesive identity shapes who we are as a person. Okay, but kids, again, are incorporating these new and their old memories, and they're building these schematic knowledge systems. Okay, these skyscrapers of knowledge. And as kids interact in the social world, get more and more memories, and those get more and more organized, just like a filing system or a filing cabinet or your OneDrive that has all your files organized. Those are the construct of your identity, basically. Okay, so that develops. Your ability to control your behavior, you ever hear inhibition? I always use this word like when you're drinking, you're drinking and all of a sudden you lose your inhibition, you start saying a bunch of stupid stuff. But again, kids by 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, they really develop this ability to control their responses, their ability to think about how they should act. Is this appropriate? Am I going to get in trouble for acting this way? And then flexibility develops, especially from like 4 on. The book has a good example where if something doesn't work, or no, it was the lettuce thing, right? The kid asked for no lettuce on his cheeseburger, and then it comes out with lettuce, and then the parent takes the lettuce off, but the kid's like, this cheeseburger's ruined because the letter has touched it. So after about age 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, our ability to realize that now that the lettuce is gone, maybe we can be flexible and that cheeseburger is not totally tainted. We can still eat it. Again, that ability to be like flexible, that's a big process here. And then there's a good quote here that when their executive function, evolves between like 4 and 8, they begin to be able to play with ideas. They can consider their responses rather than just have impulsive ones. They're able to kind of change course, or their perspective as needed, like with the lettuce, okay? They can better resist temptations. Like there's those experiments, if you offer a kid like a candy bar now or tell them they can wait 2 days and you give them 10 candy bars, do they take the candy bar now or do they wait 10 days? Like those kinds of abilities, right? And then the ability to stay focused and be able to stay on task. The attention span definitely grows a little bit. Like when can your kid really sit through a whole movie in a movie theater? Think about it. About what age is that? 7, 8, 9? Is it a little bit before then where they can just sit through the whole thing and not talk the whole time and not, you know what I mean, right? But your book also says there's other important factors to your executive functioning growth. But again, what really matters with brain growth? The most important thing is, did you eat today? And of course, you know, being free from traumatic experiences, good regular sleep, exercise, okay? And the book throughout it, and I don't know if the author is a little bit biased toward, obesity. I feel like it's kind of underlying, but the author commonly talks about the effects of obesity on brain development and child development and health across the lifespan. And there's many citations to support it. So again, worth looking into things like that. But again, as you've heard me talk about, how does poverty and lack of a quality education affect your outcomes over time? But also, how does that affect brain growth? Again, if you're a starving child who doesn't have enough food, is your brain going to grow as much? And if you're not getting as good of a school at the same time, you know what I mean? And then that's how in sociology you start delving into inequality. Like some kids have better access to food and healthcare and education systems than other kids. And does that give them an advantage in the psychological realm of physical brain growth? Again, your ability of these neural pathways to grow and be more and more efficient, to learn more stuff so that the dendrites, you just grow more and more dendrites, these interconnection between your neurons, okay? Very important stuff. So again, kids just need the basics, a hug, some food, some challenging information to stimulate their brain, and probably a little bit of structure. Next, your book gets into this really silly idea of theory. And when you look at this at first, it's kind of the funny thing, but theory is that young kids have theories of the physical, biological, psychological, and social world. Again, kids have these social theories that make sense of reality. And your book talked about earlier that, yeah, even babies can recognize when things are out of place. Like the book discusses, are humans born with this innate sense of logic? Our ability to be like, that doesn't make sense. That looks out of place. Like that's a circle and that's a square. No, those are not going to fit. So again, there's this idea of heuristics. Like it doesn't, fall so much into this class. Usually you get into heuristics when you get into like learning theories and things along those lines. But heuristics are, what are your approaches? What are your strategies to life? When you go to cook, what are your steps? Do you have the most efficient steps when you go to make a cake? Like, how do you minimize your steps? And so you don't waste a bunch of time and have a bunch of dishes left over. And so the idea is, no matter what you do, you have a heuristic or you have a theory about how you should approach things, and you have taken more or less a scientific approach. And your book says that kids go out and they ask questions, they develop hypotheses, they gather data about reality, they draw conclusions, and then they act upon that. So whether a kid is like watching how you do something as a little scientist trying to figure everything out, once they kind of figure out their approach, that becomes their heuristic. Okay, so again, it's kind of like with the violin. Like there's always been said that, it's very important when you first hold the violin to learn that proper technique, that proper heuristic, because if you learn the wrong way at first, it could throw you off forever. And again, that's kind of ridiculous because if you watch YouTube videos of like violin players, especially like the hillbilly violin players, like in the 1960s, like these big old guys in their overalls and they're holding their violin down here on their chest. They don't even have it up here. He's got it like down here and he's just playing it next to him. I mean, you'll see things like that, right? So again, but that's the idea of like there's a theory about how to play violin. But again, it's not the only approach. Like, no, there's not just one way to hold a violin. For everyone might have a unique approach. All violin players play their violin and hold their bows in different ways. If you look at famous violin players talking about how they hold their bow, everyone has a little bit different. Yes, there are some basic heuristics, some basic strategies, some basic techniques you'll find in every textbook. But again, that's not the only way. So here, the idea is that as kids interact in the social world, their identity starts to develop because as they get more experiences and they encode their memories, that becomes, the foundation of their personality. They figure out what they're interested in, what they like, how they like to talk, what they find funny. And again, these become their heuristics in their approach to life. But as we socialize and we interact in the social context, we are mentored by these agents of socialization. We are taught strategies and techniques. We are taught heuristics. And so, as we are taught these heuristics, these strategies for life, those also shape us. So, again, this idea of theory is that kids are all little scientists going out in the world, trying to make sense of reality, trying to figure out strategies, techniques for how to survive and make it in this planet. And that's a cool idea. Here we get into the theory of mind. The theory of mind is this occurs after about age 4, when you can put yourself in somebody else's shoes. So your ability to be objective, even though nobody can truly be objective because all life is subjective, nobody can get outside their head, even prove if we exist, whole matrix theory. But again, the idea is as we interact in the social context, as we become socially aware of others and we become aware of ourselves being noticed by others, that we are seen by others, we start to approach the world in a sense like we care about what others think about us. We try to not have others hate us. We want other people to like us. We want to belong. So again, when we start to develop this theory of mind, we become conscious of other people existing. And then we have the ability to put ourselves in their mind. And then we have the ability even further to ask ourselves, how is that person viewing us? And that's the idea of Cooley's looking glass self. Your perception of yourself is influenced by how you think other people feel about you. You're a human. You're always asking, how do other people feel about me? And that influences things like self-esteem and self-efficacy. But it also influences who you are as a person and your behavior. Because once you become aware that, socially conscious, you become aware of the norms, the rules, how you're supposed to act, you start to act in accordance. And this is also where the books gets into this concept of lying. Why do kids lie? And then when do they become aware of it? And lying develops as theory of mind develops because we start to ask ourselves, can we, how are other people viewing us? Are they going to like what we've done? Do we need some kind of another explanation so that they like us? Because if they knew the truth about what I did, maybe they wouldn't like us. Okay. So when a kid has theory of mind, right? One kid steals a toy from another kid. Then the parent comes and says, did you steal that toy? And the kid is aware that they are going to get in trouble for taking that toy. And so what do? They lie, right? But again, it's not until the kid develops the ability to start thinking abstractly, to start thinking about how other people feel about them, that that kid has the ability to lie. Okay. And so the book says that the ability to lie is actually evidence of brain maturation. It shows you that our brain is growing. We're becoming more emotionally, socially conscious. Our skills at interacting in the social environment are also growing, albeit lying is not a good skill to have. The fact that the kid is being creative enough to lie demonstrates our creativity in these social situations. So again, it's very cool. But again, it shows that, as kids hit 4, this really kicks in, this advanced executive functioning, okay? This front of your brain really just starts to kick in, and the kids start to use language and show off their skills and just do incredible things and incredibly bad things like lying also. But again, lying is also, is it bad, or is that just a social label that we apply to an ability to humans to be creative? And that's a whole other conversation. Your book focuses here on 2 theories of cognition. We're going to look at Piaget. And so Piaget basically says that this early childhood stage, they haven't hit the abstract thinking yet. That comes later. So again, we're still in pre-operational thought, okay? Early childhood lacking of certain logical operations that really comes with abstract thinking that doesn't kick in just yet. We're going to talk about that later, so we'll limit the conversation to this. But at 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, kids are very good at using symbols, right? So language itself is just symbols. We make sounds and then we teach people what these sounds mean. Then we make combinations of sounds and we can teach kids what that means. Okay, so again, kids learn quick to use symbols, to pick out our language, to learn grammar, to learn the phonemes, okay, the basic components of grammar at this time, okay? So they begin to think in symbols, not just based upon our senses or basic motor skills. This is the beginning of us using language to reflect, ask questions, figure out what's going on in the world. So, by about four and then by about five, kids have like mastered their language. They understand grammar. They understand the repetition of the words. They know how to put the pauses between words. Their vocabulary is very developed by that time. So by about five, kids are ridiculously good at using symbols, language to make sense of reality in their heads. It's also why your memories aren't really solidified at this time, because it takes the ability to master language to really encode your memories, because your memories and language are so interconnected. So as your language grows, your ability to organize and store your memories based upon a coded system that uses language to code it, that's why, like, your memories, aren't really there yet until they start to kick in. Your book also talks about the concept of animism, which is a cool idea. Again, this is why taking a kid to Disney World between like five, up to 8 or 9 is great, because kids still have the ability to like look at a tree as a living thing that could be like a human, just like they do look at another human. It's not until a little bit later that, how we say our imagination kind of goes away. It's not that our imagination goes away, it's that this a concept of animism kind of goes away. Our ability to like take objects in nature and give them human qualities, right? Because at some point you start to realize, like in Harry Potter, like obviously trees don't like attack you and then pick up cars, that kind of stuff. Your book also talks about centration, appearance focus, static, and irreversibles are obstacles. Very interesting stuff. Vygotsky focuses on social cultural learning. So again, when it comes to Vygotsky, we're always focusing us on how does the social context shape us? How do you make a rocket scientist? You got to sit that kid down, you got to make him read a bunch of stuff, do a bunch of math, learn physics. That's the only way to really become a rocket scientist. If you just let a kid go out in the wild and try to figure it out, unless they're like super motivated on their own, the average person doesn't just like run out and become rocket scientists. Okay. Again, we have to shape, mold people. So culture shapes us. As we interact in the world, we learn the norms of our culture. We get shaped. We are shaped by the social control that exists in the social context. Think about what happens when you deviate. If you're a boy and you dress too much like a girl, do they make fun of you? If you're a girl who wears a tuxedo to prom, do they make fun of you? Okay, again, the culture we live in highly structures us. Do you live in a place that's super religious where they make fun of you or they trash you if you don't go to church? Like think about it. Think about the culture you live in. How has it shaped us? Okay, and so that's Vygotsky. Our thinking is shaped by others. So there's Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. Language structures thought. Agents of socialization use words to teach you things. Again, you didn't come up with Christianity or Hinduism on your own, right? You were taught this by agents of socialization. They use language to teach you ideas. And then it's up to you in the end whether or not you want to believe everything you were ever told. But think about like Paul Simon, when I look back on all the crap I learned in high school, right? But think about all the crap you learned when you were in high school. How has that shaped you? You might not realize it, but all your years of math set you up so that when you need to do college algebra or, advanced calculus to be able to get a degree, or do biology or do chemistry to be able to get a degree, you have all of that scaffolded knowledge. So scaffolding is over time, we give you bits of data. And then we give you more bits of data, and then more bits of data. And then you work on projects the whole time you're getting the data to use the data. And that's how you grow in your ability, right? You learn 1 plus 1, 1 minus 1. Then we get into multiplication and division. Then we get into fractions. Then we start getting into complex algebra and geometry. Then we get into advanced calculus and we get into advanced, chemistry and physics. But how do you become that person? How do you make it in college? How do you survive? Again, you have to be socialized to have the skills, the writing skills, the math skills to be able to make it at this level. And if you don't have it, you need to go study, catch up, get tutoring, reach out, get help. Trust me, I sucked at writing. I had to work my ass off, go meet with professors, get tons of help. It's the only way I was able to survive. I had to go interact with agents of socialization to learn the new ideas, to learn the new skills. And so, again, the idea is this. You all exist in what Vygotsky calls a zone of proximal development. And the zone of proximal development you can think of as like your immediate social world and then the larger social world, right? So you're highly influenced by those that are directly in contact with you, but you're also influenced by the larger world, right? Like I was thinking honestly about religion. So again, just use it as another example. If you grow up in America, right, your zone of proximal development that's more close to you, what religion are you most likely to be socialized into? Christianity. But what if you're born in India? What are you most likely to be socialized into? Hinduism. What if you're born in China? Is it going to be Buddhism, Confucianism, Taoism, Taoism? No religion because it's communism and they don't like religion and communism. So again, think about the place that you're exposed to and how has that shaped you. But then also think about everything that you were exposed to while living there. Did you have good teachers, awesome education system? Did you live in a lake town or a mountain town? Did you live in the city? Because again, who learns to ski? People who are going to learn to ski are probably someone who either have enough money to be able to afford to go or they live somewhere close to a mountain or a hill where they can learn. But somewhere that doesn't live so like in a desert, how are they going to learn to ski? Unless they got like some mountains somewhere on top of the desert. Usually, I mean, honestly, most deserts there are mountains close by, and that's why there's a desert because the mountains like block the wind and the rain from getting in there. Okay, that's a whole geology lesson we don't need to get into. But again, it's a cool example. I grew up in the north in the cold places. We were just ice skates were on our feet at 3. And then I moved to Nashville and like nobody knew how to skate and nobody played any ice hockey ever. So again, think about your zonal proximal development. And so your specific culture that you're exposed to within your zone of proximal development, the agents of socialization in your immediate zone of proximal development, they're the ones who got in your head. They're the ones who are molding you. But then you're also influenced by the ideas of the larger world. Okay? All right, cool. So again, language, your book breaks it down that we all have a voice inside our head. Do not be scared of the voice inside your head. Once your language skills grow, private speech, your ability to talk to yourself, to make sense of reality, to figure out problems as you're going out throughout the day, it aids in thinking, cognition, and self-reflection. Your ability just to reflect upon the world. Your consciousness, that voice in your head. It exists because over millions of years, our evolutionary psychological explanation for this is this. If you have the ability to consciously reflect on what you're experiencing in your unconscious mind and in the environment, does it help you survive? So again, your unconscious mind experiences fear. It sends that information to your conscious mind where you can then reflect upon, okay, why is my unconscious mind freaking out? Why am I freaking scared right now? Okay? So that's the idea of why the ability of us to have a voice in our head and a conscious mind has grown over time. It's an evolutionary adaptation to make our survival more likely because we have the ability to reflect upon the environment instead of just impulsively acting like animals. We can ask ourselves, how should I respond in this situation? And so, kids at this age, that's what I'm saying, they start to develop that awareness, that conscious mind, that higher level executive functioning, where instead of just acting, they can ask themselves, how should I act? What's the proper way to act? How do I figure out the situation? Okay. And then the other idea is um, language facilitates social interaction. So again, we use symbols to interact with others, to not only build the social world, but also reproduce the social world by interacting with our children to teach them the skills so that when I die, they can take over for me. So again, why do humans teach kids their cultural way of life? Why do they teach them skills and knowledge using language? Again, hopefully it's so they can take over for me in the end. So the cognitive advances of early childhood do not reside in just one brain region, though. As I was saying in the introduction, you're using all your parts of the brain. All your neural pathways are interconnected just like a highway. And as kids interact in the world and grow and maturation increases, again, these neural processes are becoming more and more efficient. They're growing more connections. The dendrites from one place are talking to these places, and they're all making new homes. Just imagine a city that's growing and growing, and people just keep putting up new houses and new neighborhoods. That's what's happening in your brain. All right. So with language, at age 2, your vocab's 100 to 2,000 words. By 3 years, up to 5,000. By 4 years, 10,000. And by 6 years, it's up to 30,000. And then bilingual kids, again, up to about 50 and 60,000 at this point. I think they say bilingual kids max out around 200,000 words, and the average, mono language speaker, I think, is like 120,000 words. That's from a lecture. I just have to go back and check my knowledge on that. So don't totally quote me. I meant to look that up. All right. Finally, though, education is where your chapter wraps up. Education is not just from the education system. You are also educated by all the agents of socialization. Think about it, right? How do older siblings teach their younger siblings? How do your peers and friends teach you stuff? How does interacting with your parents and your grandparents teach you stuff? How does playing video games and reading books teach you stuff? But again, the education system itself is what society has, socially constructed over time to teach the skills and ideas, value systems, beliefs to kids so that they can role take older people's jobs when they get old and have to retire and then die so that society kind of reproduces itself. Okay. So we have invented the education system to pass on these skills. But again, it's not the only way we get educated. But what's important at, during this time and through all of this is think about all your experiences. How have you been molded from others? Who has taught you what? How did you get all the skills that you have? And that's really what we're focusing on now. All right, y'all. Catch you guys soon. If I could never can figure out how to stop these recordings. All right, thanks.